Hi, my name is Max Haynes, and today I'll be showing you a little bit about how Java works with switches. So here we have our class over switches, and the first thing we do is we have to actually import the scanner function for this one, which doesn't directly correlate with switches, but in this case we need it so that we can put in input values. We have our variables, a print line that asks the user for what case they want to display. We go ahead and we scan in that number, and then we scan in next line just to be sure that there's nothing else on that line that would get picked up and possibly mess up our value. So then we go ahead here and we start out with our switch, and then this is what value we're going to be testing in that switch. In this case, it's user value, which will be the integer that was given by the user. We have three cases here, 0, 1, and 2, and they each just print out what we selected. And then you also usually want to put a default in case something was put on there, put into the switch that didn't work. Switches work a lot like if statements, but they are a little bit faster and they have a couple of nuances to them where they can do things slightly different. This break function is a really important one that can cause some different results out of a switch that you would not usually see in an if statement or if else statement. But essentially, what this switch does is once it takes in this user value, it goes ahead and it checks each one to see whether or not it is a 0, 1, or a 2 in this case. And this is with numbers. This can also be done with characters. And then we'll go ahead and print out whatever the output says. So let's go ahead and pull this up here and we'll compile it using PowerShell. So then what we can do is we can go ahead and list everything in here, which we'll see is just the switches. We'll type Java C. And I have an error here. Sorry for that. We had a small error in the scanner. I forgot to put in system in, but now it goes ahead and it compiles properly. And now what we can do is we can actually run this program. So it pops up and it asks us what case we want to display. So we'll start out by just putting 0, and it tells us that this is case 0, which is exactly what was in our statements here. And so we see that. Now, a really interesting thing here is when you get rid of this break, what the break tells it is to do everything inside of this case and then stop going through the switch. When we take it out, I'll show you right now what happens. So it'll still compile. And now if we press 1, it'll tell us that this is case 1. But if we press 0, it'll tell us that this is case 1, which it isn't case 1. And what's actually happening here is it is running this line of case 0 and then the line of case 1 because it didn't know to stop making its way through the switch. So what we'll do is to show this is that we'll put this system out in front of the breaks. And this can seem like something that's tedious and might not actually be all that helpful, but actually it has many uses later on down the line when having more complicated switches. So we'll compile it and we'll run it again, and we'll tell it that we want it to run 0. So as you can see, this first line of this is case 0 prints out from case 0. Then case 1 prints out, and then it prints this last system out one more time, showing that what was left in the output is this case 1. That's a little overview of how switches work with numbers. These same switches can actually also be used with characters, which I will display really quickly. And the capitalization of these characters actually makes a big difference in this, so that's an important thing to remember. Now I'm going to pause this, and what I'm just going to go through here and do is continue to change all these variables to characters instead of integers and numbers, and then I'll come back and I'll re-explain what all I did. So just to hop back in here, I've been cutting out when I'm coding, that way you don't have to just sit here and watch me code. But the main changes here, we changed user value into a character. We changed this user value for the scanner. The scanner doesn't actually have a next char, which I originally typed, so you have to do this next and then the character at 0. But this will work just fine as well. We've also, all we had to do now is change our cases to this character format. But again, like I said, the capitalization here really does matter. So I'll go ahead and show you now what this looks like. So we can compile it and then run it. And now we changed what our print line was before, so we know our options. So if we just put A, it's a similar output to what happened last time when we inserted all these system print lines. And then what we did as well was we got rid of the break. So if we are to put back in the break, we would get similar results as before. And then now what I want to show you is the difference between the capitalization. So if you were to put in a capital A, you're going to get something a little bit different here. I didn't compile it again. That's why I printed twice. And here, as you can see, it prints out a little bit differently. Now, the interesting thing comes in when we enter something like Z here. It's going to tell us invalid entry, but that's what we told it to tell us. It's not actually invalid. It just automatically will drop to the default class of that scanner. So that's the importance of that default. That default is kind of a catch for any of the cases in the switch that you weren't prepared for the user to enter. And that can also help you when you're coding. And if there's like that can often be used like an else statement there, that if it's not one of these, you can think of cases as a if statement and then if else statements or else if statements, and then following all the way down to where you'll just have your else statement being default. And so that's kind of the importance of that. And that's kind of how a switch works. A lot of things can be done inside of these cases, just like an if statement. You don't just have to print out. We just print out here to show how it kind of cycles through these cases. But you could perform calculations inside of this and things of that nature. Cases are nice when you only need one number or one character in order to find out where it needs to go. And they can be a lot quicker for some of the processing systems. And they're really good, especially when you have a lot of things, so you don't have to keep typing if else. And so this helps out in that sense. Hopefully you learned something today, and we didn't cover the scanner too much. That's something that can be covered in a different video or that you can look up through many of the online websites that are available. But it is just a class that we're importing that will then read in whatever input we're putting in through this PowerShell.